Today on Switch to Linux, we talk about how the Department of Justice declares Google a monopoly, and one of their primary remedies may intensify their monopoly. That's right, folks. Welcome back to Switch to Linux. If you like this type of content, please feel free to subscribe to the channel, leave us a like and a comment down below. And today we are indeed going to be talking about the Google antitrust or Google monopoly case here that has been discussed. And this is the ruling just out in April 17th, so almost a month ago. And this is actually kind of the follow-up to the actual case, which was decided around October, declaring that Google is acting as a monopoly. Now, this is the statement that they had in their press release. Google's unlawful dominance allows them to censor and even deplatform American voices. And at the same time, Google destroyed and hid information that exposed its illegal conduct. Today's opinion confirms Google's controlling hand over online advertising and increasingly the internet itself. I'm extraordinarily proud of the dedicated public servants whose tireless efforts led to today's decision. Now, they get in here and focus about censorship. I don't remember a lot of that coming up in the cases, but okay. Can we agree? Well, if somebody gets booted off of YouTube, it is, unless you already have a large audience, you're not going to grow on somewhere like Odyssey or Rumble. It is a huge limitation. Rumble is an inbred system, unfortunately. As much as I really want to say that's the place to start, you are not going to start as a new creator on Rumble and have any form of success. Every person who is successful on Rumble had the successful YouTube career. And YouTube, you can still be found. Which is the problematic thing here if they're focusing on that if you are doing something that does get censored, like, talk about my best buddy Cody and, how to actually properly use it, even though the application itself is for download under the Google Play Store. And I've gotten several community strikes for simply talking about completely perfect, legitimate, basic usage functions of that application. That's censorship. That's why our streams are now streaming over a broad number of places. That's why you can find all of our content in other places. But still, we do put our priority here on YouTube, which is a Google-owned system. Why? Because this is where the majority of eyeballs are, and this is where a large revenue for the channel can come from, which helps fund my publishing and other things like that. And so I understand that. I'm not quite sure where that part comes into the particular lawsuit, but primarily what we've looked at and talked about in the past is the advertising end. And I can see this because with the majority of people utilizing Google Chrome as a browser and then Google search as the search engine, then what happens is as people are trying to get in and vie for these services, then Google products and services end up at the top always because they're not going to, even for some money, they're not going to put your result above theirs if it's a competing product. And that really is what the issue is that they're saying that everybody's forced onto Google and then Google is using that top search position in order to make its products stand above the competition. Now, that's the part where I agree with a portion of this. But the reality is it's very easy to change your default search engine. The sad reality is most people just don't want to. Now, it is possible to still use something like Google in a privacy-focused means, and we have people on our channel that do use Google despite being very, very concerned about privacy, but they know how to use it in an appropriate way. Although one of those people has reported to me that they are using other search engines more readily now, being as that the new blocking of non-JavaScript Google doesn't really work as well. It forces you to verify you're a human more often, apparently. So whatever that happens to be worth. The problem here is that what we're going to talk about is the remedies, and particularly one specific remedy. Now, there are a number of remedies being proposed to solve this problem. And we are going to look at one specific remedy. From The Verge, the DOJ wants to bar Google from paying to be the default search engine in third-party browsers, including Firefox. All right, so that is where we get the gist of this particular video today, and that this is a really, really bad thing because this is actually going to intensify the monopoly. Even if they do force the selling off of Chrome, the Chromium code itself is still mostly in Google's hands, although they have slowly moved that out to more of a consortium of big tech scary people rather than just one big tech scary people. And so we have to keep that in mind. So the court has already ruled Google is an illegal monopoly in search, partly thanks to exclusionary deals it makes to make it the default engine on browsers and phones, depriving rivals a place to distribute their search engines and scale up. Now, this is the problem, is that when you have a browser, you need to have some form of default set. Well, we'll talk about this a little bit more near the end here. But to go in and say, okay, when somebody goes in and starts up, downloads Firefox and starts it up, and they don't change any settings, what is the default? Google pays Mozilla, what is it? Between $400 and $450 million a year to make Google the default search engine. Now, that was from 21 to 23. I presume it's about those numbers now, but that's really what we're getting at here, is that Google pays Mozilla to be the default. They also pay, I think the number's into the billions, to Apple for them being the default. Apple came out, I could not find this article, I was looking for it again, but Tim Cook said, hey, we have no interest in changing Google because this is what people want. And in fact, this is exactly what happened with Mozilla as well. Back in 2014 to 2017, they used Yahoo as the default search engine, and they received nothing but criticism. And I completely understand, because Yahoo search sucks. I mean, it's still the default, I think, on Linux Mint, and it's just like, why would you put this as the default search? Money, that's why. Yahoo pays. Sure, okay, I get it. I change it. One of the first things I do on installing a new Linux Mint system, change that search engine. I'd rather use Google than Yahoo in all reality. But what they did here in 2014 to 2017 is they moved over to Yahoo for the contract. Ubuntu's like, no, and they changed it back, I think. Let's see. Ubuntu cut the deal to, that's right. Ubuntu cut the deal in 2010 to make Yahoo the default on Firefox in place of Google. That they caused a lot of complaints. But then Mozilla also went with Yahoo for a 3-year period of time, and nobody liked it, and everybody wanted to switch back to Google because Google just happens to work. And so that's really what is at the base here, are people really using Google because it's the default engine, or are they using Google because they want to? Now, I do not use Google personally. I'm not a fan of Google. I don't like the data collection. I don't like the search results. They're just too full of shopping, too full of AI, too full of nonsense. I can't stand using Google search. But if that's your thing, you should have the choice to use Google search. I'm okay with that. The question is, what sits at the default? Are people using the default search engine because it's default, or are they using the search engine they want? Because I've seen a lot of people that don't like Google as well and have easily and actively switch their search engines to DuckDuckGo or StartPage or Brave or any of these other ones out there. There's Ecosia, there's CRX. I mean, there's just a lot of different search engines. And so what we're getting at here is, are people really using Google because it's the default, or are people using Google because that's what they like? Mohuliam, this is the CFO for Mozilla, seems to suggest that this could cement the very market dominance the court seeks to remedy. And the reason for this, as we are going to get to in a bit here, is that, as we've already seen, Mozilla makes a ton of money from Google for being the default. Okay, Google pays Apple and various Android builds, like the Samsung builds and Motorola's, to be the default search engine, and it also does Firefox. And the DOJ wants to remedy this by saying you're not allowed to do that any longer. Now, before we get into this, I do want to make it clear, I think Mozilla is moving in wrong paths. I did this video a couple months ago. Mozilla swings and misses again. They had the terms of service. That kind of hit like a bed of rocks. They had the opt-out advertising stuff that they were sending, quote-unquote, anonymized advertising data. So there's a number of different factors here that Mozilla is really bungling. However, we need to still fight to keep Mozilla alive because it is the only alternative to a search engine core which is not owned by big tech. So we'll get into that here. But Mozilla responds to all of this in a blog post in March. Now, before we get into this, 85% of their revenue is from Google. Okay, so the problem, what Mozilla says is if you do not allow Google to make us a bid to keep them at the top, then that cuts down on the amount of money that they can make. It basically cheapens the deal. So let's say Microsoft and Google are competing for the top position. Microsoft says we want Bing, Google says we want Google, okay? And they come to the table. Right now, Google pays between $400,000 and $500,000 a year in order to $500,000 million dollars a year, $400 to $500 million dollars a year to be the default on their system. Now, if Microsoft really wanted to be up there, they might come and say, we'll pay you $600, okay? And then Firefox will have to sit back and go, okay, do we want to do that? And then we even know from our experiments, most people will go back to Google. We already know that. Do they want the extra money? Maybe they did. Well, but now if Google is not allowed to place their $400 to $500 million bid, Microsoft could come in and say, we'll pay $100,000. Well, Microsoft might have been willing to pay $600,000, but the government interferes and says you can't do that. And now Mozilla's revenue drops precipitously. And because of that, we will have a cheaper, a worse product. Possibly. I am going to talk about what Mozilla can do better here at the end of this video. But if Google is not allowed to make that offer, then they can't, the other companies will have a lower bar to bid, and they're going to mean a loss of money. So ultimately, as we've already pointed out as well, most people wanted to use Google anyway. Okay, so that was an experiment way back almost a decade ago. If you got rid of Google, then people wanted to use it anyway. Now, would that still be the case today? That's another question, because back a decade ago, nobody knew of alternatives and there were not a lot of good alternatives. DuckDuckGo was brand new. I think it was around 10 years ago. If it was brand new. Brave didn't exist. You had StartPage. That was a decent alternative. And then you had a lot of them that were, international and things like that. And so maybe 10 years ago, if you're going Google and Yahoo, I'll take Google every day of the week between those two. Bing, not so much. All right. But now with the plethora of other options that we have in search engines, and some of them like Brave coming up completely independent, it makes sense for some people to want to switch. So if Google is the default and I don't want to use it, that's just one of the first things I do when I'm setting up a new computer or a new system. Okay, let's go and change Google. I'm not going to move that, So I know how to do that, and I think most people know how to do that. Now, we do need to save Firefox. And the reason we need to save Firefox is what they get into. So first, let's talk about their commentary on the DOJ's remedy here. If the proposed remedies barring search payments to browser developers are adopted by the court, these misguided plans will be a direct hit to small independent browsers, the very forces that keep the web open and innovative and free. They say these proposed, Sherman, president of Mozilla, these proposed remedies prohibit search payments to small and independent browsers, miss the bigger picture, and the people who suffer mostly are everyday internet users. Okay, they say instead of promoting a fair fight, the DOJ's remedies would tilt the playing field further into the hands of a few dominant players, diminishing consumer choice and weakening the broader internet ecosystem. What do we mean by this? Well, Brave is a fine browser, but it's based on Chromium. Edge is based on Chromium. Obviously, Chrome is based on Chromium. Vivaldi is based on Chromium. Nearly every browser you can think of out there is based on Chromium. Mozilla is the foundation that props up the only cross-platform open source solution that is not owned by big tech. The only other one is WebKit, which is owned by Apple and generally only works on Apple devices. So here is why in Mozilla's view, why the DOJ's proposal hurts but not helps. The first, DOJ wants to ban all search agreements between Google and browsers and even independent browsers that make up a small part of the market. Dominant players that own browsers like Apple don't rely on search deals as they have significant revenues from streams like other sources like hardware, operating systems, and app stores. Though Apple does make money from having Google as the number one. I think their payment is into the billions, if I remember correctly. I didn't look up that exact number, but I believe Google pays Apple into the billions to be the primary default search. But Tim Cook says, I'm not changing that anyway because people want to use it and we have ways of getting around their privacy data collection, allegedly. So they say, meanwhile, the independent browsers like Firefox fund the development of their browsers mainly through search revenue. They require this revenue to survive. Search revenue underpins a large part of our work, keeping Firefox competitive and ensuring that web users have privacy-first alternatives. And then punishing independent browsers will not solve the problem. Judge Mejia, which is the judge in this case, found that independent browsers account for just 1.15% of U.S. searches. This means cutting off our access to search deals will not fix the issue of search dominance, not by a landslide. Instead, it hurts the browser competition. Now, what they say down here is, right now, only 3 major browser engines remain. Google's Chromium, Apple's WebKit, and the engine is really only supported on Apple devices, is not considered cross-platform, and then Mozilla's Gecko, which is the only true cross-platform alternative to Chromium. So if you cut off Mozilla's funding, unless the government would like to come in, hey, maybe we can talk about the government coming in and funding Mozilla. That's a scary thought. It's not in my notes. I didn't really think about that one. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now, the question is, can it survive as a completely independent of any and all political direction? Well, that's a question, and maybe Mozilla needs to do that anyway, as we will talk about in a bit. Okay, but to save Firefox, we have to put on pressure to save Firefox because it keeps a free and open source cross-platform browser engine, an alternative to the Chromium engine. It is not owned by a big tech company, although unfortunately it does seem to be too intermingled with for-profit companies. That may be something we need to talk about. And then there are several other projects dependent on it. Of course, Tor project is dependent on Mozilla. LibreWolf, Mullvad browser, those are all dependent on it. There's the new Zen browser, which I believe is a Firefox engine as well. And so there are a number of different web browsers out there. There's WaterFox. These are all browsers which do depend on Mozilla. And if Mozilla has to take a substantial loss of revenue, are they going to be able to survive? And that really is the question. So they say down here, Microsoft, which is a $3 trillion company, already gave up its browser engine in 2019, probably for the better, i.e. sucked. Opera gave theirs up in 2013. If Mozilla is forced out, Google's Chromium becomes the only cross-platform browser engine left. And that, folks, is the definition of a monopoly. So the remedy to Google's monopoly is to intensify their monopoly. Some of these people, these judges, these lawyers, they maybe should learn a little bit about technology before they start ruling on it. I don't know. So they say here that obviously their role in the open web is bigger than the market share. DOJ's proposal doesn't just miss the mark. It's risking handing over even more power to dominant industry players like Google or Apple. And that really is the problem. Okay, we need to save Firefox because of these, but Mozilla really needs to do better. Okay, as I've discussed in this video, among other ones, Mozilla really needs to do better. They lost a lot of users out of this terms of service crap. They really did. There's a lot of people that said ain't going back. And that hurt their browser numbers. They need to stop doing stupid stuff like this. They need to stop saying, we are a privacy company, and then we're giving your anonymized data to advertisers, but it's opt-out. No, Mozilla, you need to do better. You need to stop doing things like this. You need to stop spending money on stupid things. Brian Lunduke did an excellent breakdown of their money. This is a couple years ago now. Firefox money investigating the bizarre finances. We're going to skip over all this kind of stuff. It is a very good article here, but I want to focus on where did they spend some of their money. They spent $387,000 to someone called McKinsey Mack Group. They are a management firm redefining innovation in the white dominant change management industry. Basically, they describe themselves as a black-led, non-binary-led MMG as a global justice organization, global social justice organization. Okay, that is a political organization. Whether you agree with their viewpoints or disagree with their viewpoints, there's no earthly reason a web browser company needs to be spending $500,000 on that nonsense. That's the problem. $100,000 was paid to a company called Action Research Collaborative that has literally no website. We have nothing from what they do except this Cornell University newsletter. They say it's a standing institutional home that can support action research projects and bring together researchers, community members, and policymakers to work together in addressing pressing issues as they arise. That's political activism. A web browser company does not need to be involved in political activism. Save your $100,000. So what Lunduke identifies here is that many people might be donating millions of dollars. They thought they were supporting a web browser. Instead, it's going to these weird funds. How about this one? Here's an interesting one. $30,000 to MC Technical Inc. in 2021. They don't have a website. They only have a business registry that lists someone's house as an address, and we know nothing about this money. Where is $30,000 going to? Okay, they have the $375,000 in discretionary spending to the New Venture Fund. They are a 503c funding fiscal sponsorship nonprofit, makes grants to left-of-center advocacy organization projects, and provides incubation services for other left-of-center organizations. We don't need to be spending that much money on that organization. And I actually didn't highlight them here, but it is worth looking at their salaries as well. Hold on, what's their salaries in here? Oh, I forgot to highlight their salaries. Okay, yeah, their salaries, their base composition, $5.6 million to the head of Mozilla, with an extra $5 million in bonuses, by the way. And then they had the rest of the executive team range between $100,000 and $300,000 per year. So as Mozilla needs to do better, the first thing they need to do is stop spending money on activism causes on either side of the aisle. Be a completely 100% independent, neutral company. If you have a person in your company who is on a right-leaning person and they cannot tolerate left-leaning people, fire them. If you're a left-leaning person and you cannot tolerate right people, if you think everybody that wears a Trump hat should die or something, you need to be fired as well. It goes on both sides of the aisle. Hire people dedicated to the code of making the web work, and do not deal with activism on either side of the aisle. Fire everyone who gets involved. Just do it. You're going to have a much less toxic workplace. Okay, you need to rethink the advertising data collection. You need to rethink this terms of service crap, which was weird and nebulous, which I think they did do some change on that. But here's another thing they can do. They can pay their executives less money, a whole lot less money, unless they come up with a true privacy-focused income diversity plan. Consider affiliate deals. How about this for an interesting thought, right? I'm going to get controversial with this one. Do something like what Honey did. Just be upfront about it. Have either a plugin that you promote or something in the browser says, hey, would you like to turn this service on that will apply affiliates for various places you shop? You can turn this on, maybe give them a pop-up before you place the order. Hey, would you like to use our affiliate code and won't change your cost and give the revenue here? You need to have something in there that if they already have an affiliate code for somebody else, it's never applied. There's things you can do to patch up the affiliate revenue for using it. Now, that's controversial. Brave did that at one point in time. It was a source of revenue, but they were called out for it. Maybe they were called out because they were never told they were doing that. If people are aware it's happening, I'm fine with that. Also, give me a way to turn it off if I don't like that deal. That is a way you can get some revenue. You can still get affiliate revenue from a variety of search engines. If they go into the change search settings, which is super easy to do, and clicking the magnifying glass at the top of the search engine thing there, you can go down, hit that search settings, and boom, change your search engine. Have affiliate revenue with all of those search engines in there. Okay. And streamline your whole company into a primary focus on building a browser. Cut activism 100% out of your organization. Okay. Unless, of course, like I said, you can come up with a wonderful privacy focused funding. You go ahead and advocate for privacy stuff, but stay completely 100% neutral on all matters. You can't be super right. You can't be super left. You can't be spending a lot of money to weird shell companies that nobody knows what's going on while you're sitting here and crying that the DOJ is going to cut off our money. Shut up. You gave $1 million to unknown causes that all lean left. Shut up. Stop doing that. Be a better web browser company. Those are the things you can do, but we need to keep Mozilla alive. Now, I do have a solution for a better DOJ remedy. It already happened. It was in the EU a couple of years ago, and we talked about it. Okay, so this was updated March 29th. So in July 18, there was a EU Android decision. Google introduced a promotional opportunity for search apps and browsers in Google Play, and subsequently a choice screen requiring Android, smartphone, and tablet users to choose the default search provider during the initial device setup. So they did this to comply with a new EU law beginning March of 2024. Google will make the following changes to comply with the DMA obligations. Number one, introducing a new browser choice screen during initial device setup, in addition to a search choice screen on Android smartphones and tablets. And two, show a search choice screen on Chrome on non-Android platforms. Okay, so you boot the device up. Okay, select your default search engine. Now, what they were doing here is they were throwing in Google, and then they were bidding for everybody else could pay to be on this list. So then you have this list of search providers. You choose the right one, click the next button, and it gets your phone set up for the search engine of your choice. And DOJ, when 85% of people still choose Google, you have to shut up about it because you gave them a choice. Okay. Here's the browser choice screen. So what's your default browser when you're starting? Do you want to use Google Chrome? Do you want to switch to Opera, Samsung, Firefox, MI browser? And so they force this on Android devices. We can do that same type of thing, not just on phones. We can do that on Firefox, on Safari, on Edge, on Chrome. You first set it up. There's always a screen, next steps, next settings. Force them to choose a browser engine. Hey, you have to make a choice before you start using. Do you want to use this search engine or this search engine or this search engine or this search engine? These are the things that you can do without completely breaking up a company. Now, what does that look like? Well, Google then can still pay Firefox to be on that list. Microsoft can throw money at Firefox to be on that list. Brave might throw Firefox some money to be on that list. And now Firefox might actually get 4 times the revenue, and still 80% of their users will still choose Google because they want to use Google. This is a viable solution. It works in the EU. It complies with their laws, which are infinitely better than our laws on some of these tech-related things. Not all tech-related things, grant you, but some of these, like this. This is an amazing solution, DOJ. This is your better remedy. Give people an option and allow everybody to pay money to be on that list. You just say, hey, we're not just setting Google because they paid us the most. We're saying, hey, here's a list of things and everybody paid to be on the list. You make more money. It's awesome. So that's probably the better of the choice. So in my opinion, Google is not a monopoly. We always have the ability to choose our browser. It's the first thing I have done for 15 years, even before following down this privacy scope, even before starting this channel. I changed my browser because I got sick of Google following me around with ads. I changed it. I changed what I was doing. I changed all of it was all a choice. Google is not a monopoly. Now, I do understand if you're using Google, I will still agree it is a monopoly the way that they prioritize their services over everybody else's. I'm on board with that. But this remedy of saying to Google, you cannot pay somebody to be your top position, I do not think that is monopolistic, because even though it is the top position on everything I've done, guess what, folks? I always change it because I don't want to use Google. But you have to recognize if you force something else to be up there, and most people go back to Google because that's what they want to use, so be it. They've made a choice because we are not locked in. Even using Chrome on a Chromebook, you're not locked into using Google as your search engine. I always have a choice. But if you're using a Chromebook, and you're using Chrome on a Chromebook, probably you're using Google because I don't know. Anyway, that's the case. So there are my thoughts about this. Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments down below. Like the channel if you've not already done so. Leave us a like and a comment down below. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.